What's going on, guys? B Scott here with you, and on today's show, we got your must start or sit wide receivers ahead of week 6. Obviously, there's a lot of stud receivers that you probably should be starting anyway, shouldn't even have to ask questions about it. But I got 5 receivers on each side that you should be starting or sitting this week going into week 6 that I think have great matchups. So keep it locked and loaded right here at the first 4 downs. Guys, and welcome back. As I mentioned in the preview, we're going over some must start or sit wide receivers heading into week 6. So obviously I'm not going to go through every single matchup or receiver like I typically do. I'm going to switch it up this week and give you my opinion on 5 must start receivers this week based on matchups. And then obviously I got some must sit receivers in there as well. So before we get to today's content, don't forget, like the video, subscribe, share, thumb, bell, all that good stuff, and then comment. If there's any receivers you want to hear about, you got questions about sit starts with, you got 3 or 4 receivers and you're torn between 2 of them, drop in the comment section. I'll be glad to give you my opinion. And I give some in-depth information, plain and simple, on any given player. So drop in the comment section. I'll be glad to get right back to you heading into week number 6. So let's dive right into it. Let's start with some must-start receivers. I got 5 of them. I'm going to start with Devonta Smith, plain and simple. At home against Tampa Bay secondary that's just not very good. Giving up fourth most fantasy points to wide receivers. They've given up the most receptions on the season, 86, and he's seen at least 6 targets in every single game with back-to-back games of 7+ targets, or 7+ receptions, And I think it's just a great spot to be starting Devonta Smith here in a plus matchup. He's looked good on the season, and yes, he's had some tough goes, but I think this week you could see a lot of fantasy points to be had on both sides of the ball here. And honestly, I think Philly, if the defense can show up, could give Tampa a little bit of fits here, to be 100% honest. So I like Devonta Smith in a plus matchup. Got to get him in your lineup this week. Another guy I like, Chase Claypool. At home against Seattle Seahawks. Must start here. Honestly, you've seen an uptick in production when one of the receivers has been out. Juju Smith-Schuster out for the season. I like Chase Claypool to pick up some targets here. You saw last week, very effective. 5 catches, 130 yards and a touchdown. And Seattle giving up the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers, the 2nd most yards. And it's just a good spot for Chase Claypool. I think you're really going to get that production that you were hoping for when you drafted him going into the season. Now there's a paved path for him to see, 7-8 targets per game with Juju Smith-Schuster out of this lineup. So give me some Chase Claypool this week in a plus matchup. Should be fun. He should be in your lineups this week. Now the next receiver I'm going to be talking about, Brandin Cooks. Great matchup this week against an Indianapolis Colts secondary that's given up the most touchdowns on the season to wide receivers, 10. And on top of that, 3rd most fantasy points overall. Baltimore just cooked him up, plain and simple. You saw it on Monday night. And Brandin Cooks coming off back-to-back down games, to be honest, but a down game against the New England Patriots just last week that really tends to take away their biggest part of their offense and let the other people beat them. And so Brandin Cooks, that's why, I think New England really tried to take him away. And then the week before that, played the Buffalo Bills. It's the Buffalo Bills, plain and simple. They're playing arguably the best football in the NFL. So I love Brandin Cooks here in a plus matchup to see once again another 8, 9, 10 targets and really have a pretty good day against this Colts secondary overall. Next up, I like Jakobi Meyers this week at home against Dallas Cowboys. Now, Dallas Cowboys defense, yes, it's played good, but they've still given up a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers, plain and simple. The 7th most on the season, the 3rd most yards. And really, Myers is coming off a down game, plain and simple, just 4 catches for 56 yards, but still averaging 9 targets per game on the season. And I think they're going to be able to get that underneath game going against this Dallas Cowboys defense. You saw they've given up big chunk plays and big days, plain and simple, to wide receivers. You saw it with Kadarius Toney last week, 189 receiving yards. So I like Jakobi Meyers to bounce back here, potentially get into the end zone. I mean, last week they tried to get it to him within the 5-yard line. He just missed his first touchdown. I think this week he's going to make it happen. I think he's going to see probably 10+ targets here. And I like Jakobi Meyers in this matchup. And then lastly, Jaylen Waddle. Now, yes, it's in London, and he's playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have been actually pretty stingy to the wide receiver position, giving up only 2 touchdowns, but have given up over 1,000 yards to wide receivers, 7th most receiving yards, and Tua's back, plain and simple. And I think you're going to see an uptick in production for Jaylen Waddle. Devontae Parker looking like he might miss the game. You already know Will Fuller's out. They're really limited on their pass catchers, plain and simple. So I like Waddle in this matchup to probably see 10+ targets and honestly have a pretty good day here against the Jacksonville defense that's just not all that it's cracked up to be. So give me some Jaylen Waddle this week. I think you should be having him in your lineups for sure. So on to some must-sit players. I got a lot of players here that I would be sitting, and one of them is Allen Robinson. At this point, no matter how good Allen Robinson turns in a day, I can't be starting him. Plain and simple. He just hasn't looked good on the season. Playing in Green Bay Packers defense that is without Jair Alexander, so it should be a plus spot here. But I just can't do it. He's averaging under 5 targets a game over his last 4 games. Has not cleared 63 yards. Only 10 plus PPR points in 1 game. That was with the touchdown, just barely. I can't trust Allen Robinson. At this point, he's out of my lineups, plain and simple, even in plus matchups. It was a decent, could have had a decent day last week against the Las Vegas Raiders. It didn't happen. I just don't see it going forward. He's on my bench until he can prove me otherwise. I'm just tired of taking these little point games. I just can't trust it anymore. I'll believe it when I see it. Allen Robinson, you got to sit him this week. And also, same thing goes for Odell Beckam Jr. this week. Playing Arizona defense that has been up and down. But I can't trust Baker Mayfield. Just 4 catches for 47 yards, scoreless, over the last 2 games. And Baker Mayfield has just not looked good, plain and simple. I'm telling you, I don't know if it's the curse of OBJ. Baker does not play well when Odell Beckham is on the field. It's just, at this point, you almost got to believe it because you can see it. But I'm sitting Odell Beckham this week until I see otherwise. Honestly, he looked great in his first game back, and I've had a lot of hopes, but then Baker hurt his non-throwing shoulder. I think that's affecting his gameplay. And against Arizona, there could be weather in this game. We've seen Cleveland have some hurricane games, plain and simple. You saw last year. 20-plus mile-per-hour winds there is the forecast so far right now for that game. So obviously pay attention to the weather. That plays a factor too. But I just don't like Odell Beckham Jr. this week. I just can't trust it. And then A.J. Brown. Honestly, playing Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football. Just not a great matchup, plain and simple. Buffalo giving up the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, the fewest yards, just 2 touchdowns to wide receivers. Literally allowing less than 10 yards per reception. And A.J. Brown, coming off a bad game, 3 for 38. They didn't throw the ball a ton. He saw 6 of the 22 dropbacks, 6 targets of the 22 dropbacks. So that's not that bad. It's a good ratio, but I don't like it in the matchup. You think shootout potential, but honestly, the Buffalo defenses look absolutely great. And Tennessee, their offensive line has not looked good. Plain and simple. They just haven't. I don't like A.J. Brown in the matchup, albeit, yes, he can have a touchdown. Yes, maybe he has a great day. But I just can't trust it against a good Buffalo defense that's been lights out all season long. So I'm sitting A.J. Brown this week. I understand if you got to start him, but if you're in a pinch and you got a couple guys in better matchups, I would be sitting A.J. Brown, considering it this week. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of blowback on this one, don't get me wrong, but Marquise Brown, he's a potential sit for me this week. I know he's been outstanding on the season, 5 touchdowns. Honestly, should have 7 touchdowns. Coming off an outstanding game, 9 catches, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns. But playing the Los Angeles Chargers, who have been good against the wide receivers, plain and simple, second fewest fantasy points, have not allowed a wide receiver, just one receiver, over 70 receiving yards. So I'm not a big fan of Marquise Brown this week, albeit, yes, if he finds the end zone again. But honestly, I think he's a little more touchdown dependent this week than other weeks. And he has 5 touchdowns on the season. But if he doesn't get that touchdown this week, I think you're going to see a possible down day here. I think the Chargers can be beat on the ground heavily. The Baltimore Ravens have really gotten away from running the football since they lost their whole running back core. And so this week, they got to get that running game going. I think Lamar Jackson's going to play great. Mark Andrews will be just fine. Marquise Brown, though, could be a possible sit for me. Now, yes, if you got him, and obviously he's been great on the season, you're going to probably be firing him here. But I'm just letting you know, you got to weather the storm. It could be a long day for Marquise Brown if he doesn't find the end zone in this one. And then for me, all the Las Vegas wide receivers, I can't trust them in this matchup. Going into Mile High, new head coach, new offensive coordinator. What's going to happen? I mean, obviously, the offensive coordinator has a relationship there, but it's a new play calling system. The relationship, we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But honestly, Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards, you just can't trust these guys. 3 catches for, I want to say, 50-something yards for Henry Ruggs last week. Bryan Edwards has just been non-existent, averaging 3 to 4 targets per game. Those guys I cannot trust in this matchup, even though Pittsburgh Steelers, wide receiver weapons had a great day. I think Denver comes back, gets that defense back in line, and I think the Las Vegas Raiders offensive weapons, the wide receivers, are going to struggle in this one. So Hunter Renfrow, maybe if you got to take a chance on him as a low-end flex opportunity here, I get it. He's seeing the targets and the volume, but this week I'm going to be staying away from the Las Vegas Raiders receivers altogether. So that's it. That's your 5 starts and your 5 sits at the wide receiver position. Guys that I think you must be starting this week, and guys that I would potentially be sitting in tough matchups. Now, obviously, I didn't mention a lot of receivers. So if you have some receivers or any receiver questions, drop in the comment section. I'll be glad to answer your questions, give you my opinion on who you should be starting, sitting, flexing, all that good stuff. And then once again, like the video, subscribe, share, thumb bell, all that good stuff. And I appreciate all the love from all the support, all my new subscribers and everything. I really appreciate you guys. I do this for you guys, plain and simple. So for the first 4 downs, it's been B. Scott, and I'm out.